way our Agile ceremonies run. It changed the way I manage my backlog. I'll touch on that a little bit. So while a lot of times people hear discovery and it sounds very fluffy to them, in my world, it's a very specific strategic item. And so I hope to share some of why that is today and how you can leverage it yourself. Do you feel like we're ready to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna say only 2 or 3 things for the guys on the webinar, just to some logistics. So the idea is that Amy is gonna have a share, a deck to share with us. After that, we were gonna run some kind of Q&A session. And I will encourage people who are on the chat box, please submit your questions. I'll be collecting them, and if we'll be able to go through all the questions, that'll be great. If it's not, we will try to cover as much as possible. And then we will, 5 minutes before, we will wrap up, and that'll be all. So, Amy, all yours.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so we're gonna start a little odd. I want you to imagine with me that you are a professional poker player. You're not a product manager, you're not an engineer, you're not an agile coach, whatever you are in your day job. I want you to imagine that you are instead a professional poker player. So your job in that role is to win as big as possible and as often as possible. I want you to imagine a scenario where you walk in and you sit down at a poker table and you see 3 other players. You've never played against them before, and tonight, whether or not you win or lose will be down to 3 things: your skill, their skill, and the luck of the draw, so the cards that are dealt to each of you. Now imagine another night. You walk into that room and it's 3 players you've never met before, but instead, ahead of this game, you have researched those players. You know their tells, you know when they bluff, you know what type of bet they tend to lay when they have a certain type of hand. So you have that information in addition to your skill versus their skill combined with luck. The difference in those 2 games of poker is discovery. So with discovery, you have information that helps you place better bets. It's something you can leverage to increase the values of the skills that you have and to better manage the opportunities and challenge that luck is inevitably going to throw in the mix. So product is fundamentally about informed gambling. Really, all we do is spend the resources of our company in the way with the greatest potential for positive impact while understanding and mitigating risks wherever possible. It's really all about just making the best bets that we can. Depending on your role, you may be betting with all sorts of different resources. You need to ask yourself what those resources are and identify them so that you can make sure you're betting them wisely. So in my role as a product person, the thing I most frequently bet is developer time. So nothing is more important to me than using our engineers' time on the best thing. But the definition of best changes all the time. It can mean using their expertise to work carefully through a plan of complicated work that they're gonna have to share with other engineers. It can mean making sure an overworked engineer takes some time off to avoid burnout. But most frequently, it means that I'm ensuring my engineers are working on the thing that is most likely to deliver the most value. So before my team really conducted rigorous product discovery, it felt a lot like we were just releasing as much as we possibly could in hopes that something would catch. We would release feature after feature, oftentimes directly out of the brain of a very passionate CEO, hoping that something that we released into the wild would suddenly catch fire and work. We had a lot of lagging indicators. We didn't have a lot of leading indicators. There wasn't a lot of confidence that the work that we were doing as a team or for our engineers was really going to be valuable when we released it to production. If you're an engineer person and you've ever heard, oh, well, when I test, I like to do it in production, it felt very much like testing in production, which is tremendously expensive. After we kind of went on this journey of pulling discovery into our agile practices, it's completely different. The confidence level when we release something new is much higher. And the time we spend on things that aren't validated is almost non-existent. And we'll talk a little bit about the impact that had on our agile cadence and our backlog a little bit further into the talk, but that's been huge. So when people wonder why you should bother with discovery, like why do the extra work? Why take the extra time? Because it does take more time. It's never going to increase my engineering capacity, but discovery work dramatically reduces the risk that I bet my company's resources, my developers' time, on work that fails. And as a product person, that's really important to me, because when I take risks, I want to take smart risks. I want to take risks knowing that I am doing it in the most responsible way that I can, with the best likelihood of a win. So let's say that you are at least tentatively open to the idea that discovery would be a good thing to include in your Agile practice. You're saying, okay, I want to make better bets. I want to deliver products that are more likely to succeed. So what type of discovery should you use? And more importantly, how do you convince an organization that discovery is worth the effort? I have been in radically different types of organizational surroundings, some in which discovery was incredibly valued, some where discovery was kind of looked at a little bit hostilely as a waste of time and money. And your approach to how you decide to do discovery should bear that in mind. So discovery work can mean many things. It can mean finding new product ideas, learning about your users, learning about competitors, usability and viability testing. But realize that to your CEO, discovery may just mean an intangible and poorly defined to-do item that results in a longer timeline and a higher cost. And to your engineers, discovery might mean having to rework their code that they think works just fine because somebody says it's not user-friendly. And to your fellow product people, it may be viewed as adding more work to an already packed schedule and risking a delivery timeline. Those are all attitudes that I come across daily and in different levels of passion, depending on the person I'm talking to. I've formerly had CEOs that were very anti-discovery, and I've had CEOs that were very pro-discovery. I know fellow people in my product organization that will kind of roll their eyes if I set a discovery meeting, and people that will be all in and show up with sticky notes. So it really just depends on where each person is coming from. And just like all stakeholder management, you need to know enough about the people you're approaching to know where they are so you can meet them. So once you understand that product discovery is really just a powerful set of tools for managing risk and impact, and you want to start using them, how can you prove it to those other people in your organization that are going to come at discovery from all sorts of different places, anywhere from complete indifference to open hostility, and maybe, hopefully, curiosity. So I've outlined a couple of ways to start or restart discovery inside of an org. Let me advance this slide. So these are what I like to call some discovery starters. There are 3 different ways you can go about starting a passion for discovery inside of an Agile organization. And these will work even if you're not Agile, but I know that's kind of the focus of the group, so I want to frame it up that way. The first one, and probably the easiest one, is to start really small. So pick something so tiny to do discovery on that your leaders won't notice and won't mind if they do notice that you're working on it. It's something that you can do alongside your normal workload. They're not giving up anything for you to do this extra work. This can be things like talking to customers for 5 minutes on a sales call about their day, learning a little bit more about them rather than just answering the questions that your salespeople are putting forward or committing to timelines, taking a step back and asking them, if we could do one thing for you today, what would you want us to do? What's a time when we've failed something really badly for you? Starting to learn those little things so that you can tell a story that nobody else in your organization can tell. You can pick a very small feature that your team owns and try to learn how to improve it iteratively. These are things that are so itty-bitty that even if you make missteps in the beginning of your attempts, it's not really costing the organization anything it's going to feel. So no one's going to push back on you for the most part. If you feel like you have a really supportive manager, you can let them in on the secret and help them get excited about it. And if you feel like you have a manager that needs to be shown progress before they can get excited, then you can just kind of sideline it. The next one is kind of the opposite of starting small. And so I like to warn people that unless they feel pretty confident and excited that they're going to be able to rally a group of people and do something effectively, to kind of avoid tactic number 2. But it is taking on something gross. The picture I used here, I looked for a picture of a dumpster fire, but when I found a picture of a toilet fire, I was really excited because that's even better. You want to find the problem in your organization that is so challenging, so gross, so persistent that nobody wants to touch it or tackle it anymore. It's especially good if someone's tried to solve it before and failed, because the organization already knows that what they were trying already didn't work. And so by this point, they're looking for somebody, anybody, to take this thing on so that they don't have to do it and they can stop ignoring it. And God forbid they have to hire from the outside to tackle this problem, because usually it's very convoluted and extremely legacy oriented, and nobody from the outside world could possibly understand it. So you can be the Joan of Arc of your organization and like raise your hand and be like, ooh, I volunteer as tribute, but I'm going to need support to do it this other way. And oftentimes in their moment of desperation, an organization will go, okay, cool, however you want to manage it is fine, just go manage it. And that's the moment where you say, sweet, I'm going to, find a visual designer who's really interested in research and just sort of morph them into a product designer. And I'm going to find an engineer who really cares about delivering awesome products at the end to our users that create value. And I'm going to make them my lead dev. And together we will tackle this horrible, gross fire and prove that discovery has value. Later on, when we talk about resources, there's actually a link to a talk I'll share where somebody takes a really great example working within publishing inside the British government and uses that as his moment to like sell an organization or a government on the idea of like discovery inside an org. And it's a really powerful story. So I do recommend you check it out. So maybe you don't want to start so small someone doesn't notice, and maybe there's no raging toilet fires at your organization. The other way, and this is the way I did it, is to find a cover story. So finding a big technical product that requires a ton of development time, but not a ton of stakeholder management or product person time. So if we got in our time machine and went back to late 2017, my team was asked to take an assessment product, so a quiz, essentially, a very heavily guardrailed legal quiz, off of one of our hiring products and put a new one in its place, seamlessly, with no changes to what our customers were experiencing, because the customers were paying a lot for this feature and we wanted to create as few ripples of awareness as possible that this change was happening, but it was going to save the company a lot of money. It's the sort of thing that you don't get really excited about from a technical standpoint. There was lots of gross old code we were touching, but it created a full quarter of time when my product designer and I could have just sat there, grooming a backlog or, having breakfast with our stakeholders a little more frequently. We probably could have played a lot of Sudoku, but instead we decided to take a big step back and say, why do our customers not like us very much? If any of you guys are using NPS feedback, we had a pretty rotten NPS score, and it had been that way for long enough that the company just sort of accepted it. But in this quarter of breathing space that we had, we said, well, why? Like, we work really hard on this product. Why is it that nobody likes it? And that was fundamentally what kickstarted us into trying to solve a gross problem. But really, it was because we had that air cover created by the development team. The great news about this, if you are in an organization that isn't supportive to product discovery at this time, there's not really an expectation most of the time that you're doing anything other than shepherding the technical project. So if you can take that time to really learn about the problem for your core users, that's going to be tremendously valuable for you as you come out of that technical project into your next piece of work. Now, in my case, my organization had recently become obsessed with discovery again, which was awesome. We had coaching, we had a lot of support, and I was able to tell my manager directly what we were doing, and she was comfortable with that. Same for my product designer. But honestly, if that hadn't been the case, I think we probably could have just hidden under the layers and layers of technical requirements that were being passed around and tried to do our research anyway. So there's three kind of ways to get started. You can mix and match those. If you're new to discovery, starting small is good. I'd had years of kind of discovery practice when I decided to like take the step back and tackle the big vague thing. So I can see ways you could mix and match these. It's always good to do the start small till you get comfortable and a little bit confident. And then you can start to say like, hey, this is the thing I'm doing, and, find a bigger problem to tackle. All right, so here's some tactics, some things I recommend when a team comes to me and says like, ooh, we want to do this now. How do we do it? The first thing I tell them is to just do it. Like, as cliched as it is, as much as it sounds like a shoe commercial, if you're not already talking to your users, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It really is. And that's okay. Just keep doing it. Keep doing it until it's comfortable. I can't tell you how many times I have awkwardly started a phone call or walked into a place of business just to find my customer and talk to them. And when I say find my customer, I don't necessarily just mean people that use my product. I mean people that are like the people that I expect to use my product. In fact, some of the best work I've done is coming from people that don't use my product that they could. So for instance, most of the work I've done in the last 2 years has been on self-serviceable products for small business owners and location managers. So one of my favorite things to do is grab a notebook, go out, hit a shopping mall or a strip mall or an area with a lot of little shops, and just walk around for the day. I go into a store, I ask to see the hiring manager. They inevitably believe that I'm there to apply for a job, so they unfailingly give me to the hiring manager. And then I tell them that I am here to learn about them and ask them a couple questions. I've learned some really great things that way. Most of my closest charter customers I've actually met that way. I've met people that let me spend 30 days locked in a construction trailer with them while they interviewed people for the opening of their new store. I've met people who let me, come after hours to sit in and listen on their interviews. And just because I went out and I asked. So it's going to feel uncomfortable if that's not your personality type. It can help a lot if you pair up. But that's the key, is just to start doing it. And speaking of pairing up, try to identify some allies. I almost guarantee there's got to be someone else in your organization who cares deeply about the work you do being meaningful, about whatever you release or whatever you create actually having the impact that you hope it'll have. Find those people and then make them your allies. Offer to, spend a lunch hour going out and talking to your users or calling them on the phone. Having somebody along with you can help. Not only can it help challenge what you hear, I guarantee you're going to come back from a research session and you are both going to have had some points that were similar that you picked up on, but other things that were completely different. And there's a ton of value in those moments. But the other thing is, especially if you're in an org where discovery is still a new practice, it really helps to have somebody there to just share enthusiasm with, to lean on, to share stories with. It can get very lonely trying to bring a new practice to being all by yourself. So I recommend not trying it unless you become convinced there's no one else in the org that wants to do this. And if there's no one else in the org that wants to do this, I would probably take that as a signal that maybe I should start polishing my resume a little and being a little more active on LinkedIn. So once you've identified your allies, bribing the rest of them shamelessly works really well. So when we first got started doing really heavy discovery, going out and talking to people we'd never talked to before, spending a ton of time in the field, there were not standing discovery meetings at this company to share research findings and things like that. We had been through an era where discovery was very valued. We'd fallen out of it into a time when basically everybody in the research organization had quit except for one very overworked product designer. And my product designer and I were just starting to try and relight this fire as the organization was showing appetite for it. So when we held our first discovery meeting, we bought bags and bags of candy, and we literally covered a conference room table in candy. And we put a video of our research session on the screen, and we called it a movie screening. And we invited the people in the company that we had identified as most likely to be discovery allies. So they came into the room, realized there was a bunch of candy, got excited, sat down, watched our video, and wrote things on Post-it notes. And that was the first discovery meeting. It was very unstructured. It was very outlandishly full of calories and sugar, but it set a really good tone. We had a video of a customer, or actually not a customer, a potential customer walking through our product for the very first time. And that was something that nobody in the company had ever seen before. Nobody had ever gotten someone to let them video them while they were doing it. And simple as it was, people were really fascinated to watch. They were really fascinated to see where we thought something was simple, but in fact, this user was struggling with it. Or they thought something wouldn't be obvious, but instead, this customer found it right away. So it was really a great start, and it was very simple. We had a video, we had some candy, we invited a few people, and it worked really well. And over time, we didn't have to bring candy anymore. We weaned them off that. Like, there was still candy at the next meeting. Lunches work really well. Waffles work great. I've been known to bring a waffle iron into the company and like make made-to-order waffles for people. So for a while, bribing is really key. But over time, as they see the value in your meeting, you shouldn't have to bribe them at all. And in fact, if you don't hold a meeting for a while and it's not a regularly standing meeting, listen for them to ask, because if they're not asking you proactively, you might not actually be providing the value that you hope you are. While you're bribing them, tell stories. So tell the story of the customer encountering your product for the first time. Tell the story of somebody who wasn't helped by your product, but could have been. Tell the story of the time you guys failed to do something. Tell the story of the time you guys succeeded. People love stories. Even the very analytical, data-driven people in your organization, they love stories too. They just love stories that incorporate data. So tell them stories and use that to build empathy and show your company something that they don't even think they don't know. Show them the customer that's struggling, that they thought was just going to get this. And they will suddenly question what they don't know about their own product. And that moment is tremendously valuable. Celebrate when you are wrong. So if discovery is a tool that helps us place better bets with the resources of our company, every test that proves your hypothesis wrong before you invest resources is worthy of celebration. You can actually sit down and quantify it. If you have a developer who's willing to give you long enough to say, here's how much time I would have allocated for this, here's the level of effort, here's the point sizing, you can actually say, like, here's how much time and money and resources we saved the company with this discovery test, with this work ahead of time. Some of my favorite things are the things that we were almost certain were going to be a win, and we put a simple fake door test out, or we did a couple of qualitative interviews and realized, ooh, nobody wants that. Last year, my team was really riding high off of a lot of confidence because we had solved a problem nobody thought we could solve. Even our customers didn't think we could solve it. So we were feeling pretty good about this discovery thing, and we felt very much like subject matter experts. And we said, you know, I bet our customers would really love to add interviews to their schedule. Not our schedule, because people weren't using it that much, but they have schedules. We know this about them because we've done a lot of research. I bet they'd love to add interviews with candidates to their Gmail calendar, to their Outlook. You know, let's just go ahead and put it in the product. And one of my engineers, who was amazing, said, oh yeah, that's a super lightweight effort. I could do it this way. It'd be like X number of points. I was like, it's not that lightweight. And also we should probably test it. They're like, really? Because we think, and then we all took a step back and we said, yeah, let's just test it just for fun. Like, it'll be great to prove ourselves right. So we put a fake door test out there that made it look like we had launched this feature where they could click on, yeah, add this interview to my calendar, and not, like, it failed just amazingly. Beyond any of our wildest expectations, it failed. And so we very rapidly realized nobody wanted this feature. And we talked to a couple of people and understood why nobody wanted the feature and saved ourselves a lot of time and money. And that's a story that I love to tell. I actually went to our discovery meeting, which now is a standing meeting, and told the whole company about failing because I was like, we just saved a ton of money. Let me tell you about it. I sounded like a Geico commercial. I don't know if you guys are exposed to that, but I was just like, let me tell you how much money we just saved by proving ourselves wrong. So that's awesome, and that's really important. But equally important is to celebrate your wins. So recently, I was home and testing something, a piece of software that we had built on my phone. And my husband looked over my shoulder and I said, oh, do you want to see this? Because I hadn't recently shown him the product and it had changed a lot. And I just wanted to show him, like, here's what I spend all day on. And so I was walking him through it. I was like, here's how you would look at your applicants. Here's how you invite them to interviews. Here's how you send screening questions. And he took a long pause and he said, this is going to sound bad. And I was like, no, I'm sure it's fine. He's like, no, it's going to sound bad, but this feels really obvious. He's like, but I mean that as a compliment. And I was like, no, absolutely. Like, yes, it feels obvious. It feels like, of course, this is the only way you would have done it. But that's because we worked really hard to figure out the mental model of our users. And I told him, I was like, I can't wait to tell my product designer about this. I can't remember if I texted her that night or if I told them all the next morning at Scrum, but I definitely like got really hype about telling them that, because a great product with great discovery will feel effortless. It will feel like the inevitable conclusion of the way that feature or that software was meant to be. The problem with that is that over time, if you've got a really great discovery function, your company can actually start to lose sight of how valuable it is and what it's doing, because they get so confident that everything they produce is fabulous. And I've seen that happen before, and it's really annoying, because then you lose all your fabulous designers and you're right back where you started from, starting small or fighting a raging fire, and it's no fun. So celebrate the wins. When you launch your beautiful, fabulous, intuitive thing, also show the company the other things you thought about. Also show the company the ways this thing could have gone if not for discovery. Talk about all of the opportunities and all the solutions that you tested, and especially highlight the ones where you were wrong. Because if you don't, eventually they might start to think that, hey, we know everything. We don't need to go revalidate. We don't need to do discovery. We can just build and build and build, and it'll always be this successful. Well, it won't. It might be for a little while your assumptions are still valid, but sooner or later your assumptions will not be valid anymore, and you guys will miss that if you're not in a culture of continuous discovery. This is all a process, and it's not always straightforward, and sometimes it goes well and sometimes it's a challenge, but you'll always be better off for having done it, even if it takes a little more time. And so the next time somebody in your organization tells you to go place a bet and you feel like you don't have all the information, I would challenge you to think about whether this is the moment when you want to start incorporating discovery into your project organization, if you haven't already. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the questions that were submitted ahead of time. But if anybody has any questions, I really prefer conversational formats. So I did about 20 minutes of presentation, and then I'm going to just jump into Q&A if everybody's good with that.
Awesome. There is a couple of questions, Amy, on the chat box. One is coming from Miguel, who is asking, when you have to start a discovery for a new big piece of functionality with a development team, is it better to start with the whole team or just with some few members?
Interesting. Okay. So the question from Miguel is, when you have to start kind of a new feature, is it better to start with the whole development team or just select members?
Yes.
Perfect. I would say that depends on your team. If you feel like you've got a lot of people who are going to be resistant to doing product discovery, I would include one or two key members that you think would be able to bring a perspective to it. When we first went through discovery coaching, as I mentioned, my developers were almost entirely locked down on a very technical project. So I had access to none of them full-time or even mostly part-time. So my lead developer was completely tied up in making sure that the technical requirements of what they were delivering were buttoned up, and he could not be in on most of the discovery. So we actually wound up doing a thing where we would go out and do a bunch of discovery, and then we would come back and take 2 hours and share it with all the developers at the same time. And that actually wound up working really well for us. And we've kept that as a format. And over time, what was really cool was the developers started asking for that meeting. They would hear us talk about it at the end of every Scrum. We call it the discovery after party. We would share what we learned the day before, or the thing we were testing, or the prototypes that were coming out of it. And when enough of that kind of built up that they had a real curiosity, they'd be like, hey, can we do a discovery zone meeting? Like, we want to sit for a day and just sift through this. And there's been times we were able to build our entire roadmap out of those meetings, but that was because the whole dev team was there. Now, it depends, too, on the size of your dev team. If you're going to have to, drag 12 people into the field with you, that's going to be really challenging. Especially if you're doing on-site work, I would recommend maybe choosing 1 or 2 other people to go with you. And if you've got a lot of different disciplines like product marketing, product design that want to come with you, just rotate those people out. Right now, I'm in a moment where I'm taking product marketing with me a lot, so I tend to offer like, hey, does product design or does an engineer want to come? Just so we don't overwhelm our unsuspecting victims. But to answer, I would choose based on your team. At some point, you're going to want to involve all of them because you're going to want buy-in from everybody. Otherwise, you'll have a prioritization fight, like, why are we working on this? But in the beginning, when you're first getting started, it's easier to bring along people that are open to it.
Right. So there is not a magic number, right? So it depends.
It's not a magic number, but if you're going to do in-person stuff, try not to outnumber your participant too heavily, because it will freak them out.
All right. Awesome. If you want, Amy, I have another one also from Miguel, and then we can keep going.
Perfect.
The other question is, when you have different alternatives to explore, and they are not easy, and it's not clear which one is the best, does it work to explore them all, or you have to choose one?
So if you're looking at something that's really challenging, I would challenge yourself. Say, hey, I'm looking at these options. What problem am I trying to solve? Which one really seems best positioned to solve it? And if you come down to really and truly you have 2 or more options that seem equally valid and they're all very challenging to test, I would take it to your engineers and make sure you're not missing something, because there's been a few times when I thought something would be very challenging to test, and in fact, when I took it to them, they had a completely different and much better way to test it. I would look at trying to question the type of testing you're expecting to need to validate. So depending on what it is you're trying to achieve, you might need to run a high-touch concierge test, but maybe you can do it for just a week. You might need to do a screen or a fake door test, but maybe that's something that engineering can take care of while you run a concierge test. So typically I try to look at one main area, like place my bets in one spot, but then kind of poke at 1 or 2 other opportunities that are a lot lighter weight. But in the situation you're describing, I would almost take a step back and just see if there's an easier way to test some of these assumptions. Like, ask yourself, what's the lightest, fastest way to test? And if you want, after we wrap up here, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, if you want to describe what the thing you're trying to test is, like, I geek out over that. I would love to give you any help I could on structuring that.
Awesome. Sorry, Amy, just to try to close that questions. Would you think that is also depends on the for example, on the outcome that you're looking after, or that you're putting the focus on, and then not try to try to reach or investigate a lot of things at the same time, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I can I can always point back to the core problem we're trying to solve, and I also like to put it in my customer's voice. If you can't put the problem you're trying to solve into the voice of your user, I also encourage you to ask whether or not you're solving a problem for them or for your business, because sometimes you'll find that the problem you're setting out to solve might not be quite what your user would want, and then I think you can be wasting a lot of effort. But I always try to tie it back to one main thing. I'm aware at any given time of what the main problems my user encounters are. I actually have a dumb chart that I call Maslow's hierarchy of employer needs, and it's got like all of the different problems they encounter from the time when they're very desperate to the time when they're well staffed. And I was telling people the other day, like, you never stop hearing about problems from your users, you just hear different problems. So when I solve the problem of them having enough applications, I start to hear the problem of, I don't like the applications I have. And when I stop hearing about, I don't like the applications I have, but nobody's responding when I ask them for interviews, like, I know I'm solving different problems. So you really have to learn enough about your users to know which problem's most important to solve, and then focus there pretty maniacally.
Right. Perfect. So we have another question that they're coming in, but I don't know if you wanna keep going, Amy, and I'll save them for later.
Sure. Yeah, some of the questions that we had before the webinar started. The question about why we decided to embark into the journey, I feel like we kind of covered that. We had this downtime that was created by a big gross technical project, and we said, hey, let's go solve something crazy. In retrospect, I think I can see how we would manufacture it, which is why I included that in the ways to start. But at the time, it was kind of pure luck. I don't know how my practice would have changed, or when it would have, or if it would have been as radical if we hadn't had all that time to ourselves, because we literally wound up taking a full quarter where we were out of the office more frequently than we were in the office learning about our users, and that was tremendous. The other question, how did you know you had the right skills, and what are the right skills? So curiosity is a big one, like a willingness to be uncomfortable and a belief that anything can be improved. You have to believe that you're not always right, that you're not even usually right. And just be ruthlessly curious about how things could be different and how things could be better. But really, there's not a required core skill set other than a willingness to engage. What was my knowledge about product discovery before I was coached? So like I mentioned, I was really lucky that in 2017, Snag underwent a kind of like attitude metamorphosis where they came back to the light and wanted to do discovery. So we got a lot of great coaching resources. We had 3 months of coaching with Teresa Torres. We had a week-long intensive workshop with Jeff Patton. So I got to do a lot of learning there that was really awesome. But I was familiar with discovery because we had formerly had a very strong design organization at Snag that I had observed and participated in product discovery with. The coaching really pushed our team into new habits, and it challenged us to talk to our users much more frequently, which is why the first thing I say is to just start doing it. Initially, the goals that we had in our discovery coaching for talking to users, the frequency seemed insane. It can be very hard to get business owners and hiring managers to give you 15, 30 minutes of their time. And I thought that it was never going to happen. And it forced us to learn new ways to contact our users. And that was really valuable in and of itself. So I had some familiarity, but the pacing that coaching required made me get better at it and made me force myself to do more of it. I had reached a point where I thought I was doing enough, and I've realized that that was not the case. Let's see. As a new way of doing things, which implies a change, you must have learned things that were relevant or ditched things that were outdated. Could you mention any that you recall vividly? Yes. So as a product manager, I am included in a ludicrous number of meetings. I don't know what the culture of meetings is like for you, but over here it's like meetings all the time. Oh, all you've got available is lunch. Suddenly lunch is a meeting. Also, can you come in early for a meeting? And by the way, we might need to stay late for a meeting. So the first thing I did was I ruthlessly questioned and prioritized the meetings that I was attending. I treated it just like I would, my backlog. I was like, what's the most important thing to attend? What's the next most important thing to attend? All right, where does this stop being valuable to deliver? And instead I should be doing discovery. I asked the people who were inviting me to these meetings if I could just send a message ahead of time or get the agenda afterwards. And I really stopped doing things that weren't directly providing value. I also started telling my team to do the same. My favorite moment was we had, this is going to sound terrible because I know this is an Agile group, we had an Agile coach coming in to try and teach everybody in the organization how to use a new backlog management tool. And they invited my entire team, but everyone was optional but me, and they all showed up. And so we sit down across from the new Agile coaches, and everyone, like my developers are sitting with me, and I felt very proud of myself in this moment, which is the only reason I remember it. And I looked around and I said, I looked at the Agile coach and I said to them, is there a reason that the developers need to be in this meeting, or are they just here for informational purposes? And they went, oh, they're just here for informational purposes. I was like, okay, great. And I looked at the engineers and said, if anybody has something else they should be doing with this time, feel free to leave. And as one, they all stood up and left the room. And I've never been happier that I could get them out of a meeting. And later, like we talked about it, like we showed them the highlights. They know how to use the backlog tool, but they didn't need to sit there for an hour and a half learning about all the ins and outs of this thing that fundamentally I want them spending as little time in as possible. So ruthless with your time. Speaking of backlogs, I specifically structure my backlog in a new way. I call it, this is a little morbid, I call it hit by a bus backlog, because I should be able to get hit by a bus on the way to work, and the team should be able to do all the Agile ceremonies without me. I kind of want them to spend as little time as possible while getting the best value out of it. We manage our backlog in Jira, but honestly, I could structure it the same way if we were doing Trello or Leanboard or any of those. So managing your backlog in such a way that you don't have to spend a ton of time hands-on in it, and you can be out of the building learning, and your team can still be managing things in priority order, knowing what needs to be groomed, knowing what needs to come into planning. That was really important. And both of those things, ruthless prioritization of time and managing my backlog in a very specific way, allowed me to be out of the building probably 70% of the week. during the heaviest weeks, and it was not an issue.
Great. Let me ask you something on that came on the chat box. Amy, Pablo is asking, how do you recruit customers for product discovery? Do you have direct access to customers somehow, or do you rely on customer-facing teams to help you find users, or tools maybe also?
Right. I like to do both. So I like to talk to our salespeople. We do have a sales team. We have a customer executive and care team. So people that manage incoming potential customers. We have people that manage the relationships with current customers. And we also have customer support who manage the relationships with angry customers. I like to leverage all of those people to bring different customer voices into my pipeline, but I also very consciously don't just listen to those. So there's a lot of opportunities we would have missed if we only listened to the voices inside the organization from the customers we already have. If you think about it, if you're building for only the people that you're hearing about from your internal customer-facing teams, you have limited yourself automatically to solving for the pool of people already using your product, which means that any solution for somebody who isn't a current customer is necessarily going to not happen. So we like to identify who our persona is and go find them in the wild, whether they're using our product or not, and make sure that they are a part of our concierge groups. Those are the customers that we are closest with. And we do that by walking into their stores. We do that by, leveraging contacts inside the building. I knew somebody here who was friends with the hiring manager at a local restaurant, and I asked if they could connect us, and that person let us into their hiring life for a full 30 days, and we sat in on all their interviews and owned all of their application tracking. So it's really just about balancing those things. I would say that if you ever find all your customer voices are coming from a single source, that is a very dangerous thing to do because you'll automatically be blind to all the other stories happening outside that customer group.
Awesome. So another one from Maria. Do you have specific ways to test your ideas with final users and customers to convert them in validated learning? Do you think artificial intelligence could help there?
I think that there's probably some ways for AI to help. I know that there's ways that we could scale some of our efforts if we had more AI resources. I do a lot of concierge testing, which is kind of is manually faking a development process. So if I had some magic AI assistants, I could probably put them to good work. We don't do that right now because honestly, if I was going to apply AI to something, I would want to apply it to the product instead of the testing because it's a really valuable tool. If I had myself an AI team, it would, I know where I'd put them right now, and it wouldn't be my testing. But in a world where I had plenty of those resources, I think I could probably run my concierge tests at scale a lot more easily.
Great.
One thing that was in the questions that were submitted ahead of time was, what change have you experienced that was most radical compared to how you used to do things? And interestingly, this is actually related to prioritization and planning. So the one thing that we do not do any longer on our team is prioritize work that isn't validated through qualitative feedback. So if we don't have evidence that a change will be valuable for our users, we will not spend development time on it. We will not groom it, and we will not put it into planning, and we will not put it through development. And the interesting thing that happened then was a couple of things, actually. So we formerly were without product design and without discovery, and we were, again, releasing everything we could, just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what would stick. And it was a very fervent and kind of panicked pace because you had to release a lot because you were never sure what was going to work. When we had product design and we had discovery and we decided we were no longer going to do that, we were only going to place bets we felt confident in, and we were only going to put development time against things we were confident in. An interesting thing happened. We would get into product planning and we would put the cards that we had validated and we knew were going to create value at the top. We would groom them, we would put them into planning, and we would have extra capacity. And we would look at each other, and I was like, well, we're not going to put anything in that isn't validated, so how about some tech debt? And it was the first time in my career where we actually found, like, organically there was a space to address tech debt, and organically there was a space to address bugs. And it wasn't like we were having to say that 10% of every sprint was going to be dedicated to tech debt or 15% to bugs. It just happened because there is an upward limit if you have limited design capabilities to how much you can validate in a 2-week sprint cycle. And so we found that there was just naturally this air to breathe that tech debt could get solved for. And we're not doing it perfectly, and there is still absolutely a tech debt backlog, but the fact that it was happening and it didn't have to be forced and it wasn't a math exercise anymore was really crazy. And that was awesome. And it was also great for our developers to know I would rather not push a feature that we weren't sure about than have them work on something that was risky like that. They knew how much I valued their time, and that felt really good to them. Yeah. So, and we've got a couple more questions that I've pre-answered, but if you've got any in the chat, like, I'm all about just having a conversation.
No, not yet. No one submitted anything.
Cool. How different was your job before product discovery and when you got comfortable with it? This was crazy. Like, it's a different job, honestly. It felt like a completely different job. It was a career I was much more passionate about. I went from spending my time being obsessed with solving as many problems as I could throughout the day to being obsessed with solving the most important problem for my users. And I still have really crazy days where it feels like I'm just firefighting and reacting to things, but I find it much easier to challenge those days and to recenter myself on the most important things I need to do. Because now I know who I'm solving for a lot better, and I know the problems that they want me to solve. And it's much easier for me to look at some of the things that come up in my day-to-day and say, this feels urgent, but it's not important. And that really changed the pace of the work I was doing and kind of the strategic thinking that I brought to it. And that was kind of tied into the next question, which was, what were the first signals you noticed that made you feel product discovery was working, and how did you showcase it to your stakeholders? I actually distinctly remember this. It was such a bizarre feeling. I was on my way to work, and I was thinking about something that leadership had told us they thought we should do. And in my mind, I was just refuting it point by point, going, well, here's why this isn't valuable, and, like, here's why it's not going to be a great investment of the resources. I was, like, mentally having that two-sided conversation with my leader in my head. And I kind of had a moment when I just stopped, because it's not very like me. I was like, was I being combative? Was I being negative? Like, why was I shooting this down? And I had this moment when I was like, no, this isn't combative. This isn't negative. This is confidence. This is, I know my users, and I know the data I can put my hands on to prove that this isn't the way that they want to be impacted. And it was literally a light bulb went on in my head, and I went, this is what subject matter expertise feels like. Like, this is what being a SME feels like. And it took a while to get there, but when it happened, it completely changed my approach to work. I feel so strongly now that as a business, we have to solve for our users, and we can't solve for ourselves and pretend we're solving user problems, or we will not be successful. And it's changed my willingness to step out of my comfort zone and advocate for my users forcefully, like respectfully, but forcefully. And I think that that's been really amazing. Like, people in the organization seem to view me a little differently, and really respect that they know I'm coming from a place where I am informed and I am passionate about delivering something of value. And that's been really cool. I actually feel like it's my responsibility to do those things now. So I'm no longer kind of willing to sit back quietly and listen to decisions being made that I think spend our resources in a bad way or place a bad bet. I have to open my mouth and say something because I have data that says otherwise. So it's been a real fundamental change to the way I work. The next question was, what have the results of this shift been? The morale of our team went way up. We had a major problem with development turnover for a while, and during the time when our team operates this way, the development turnover went to 0 for a full 2 years. They were really excited to work on something that they knew was important, and to see it happen in production the way that we had expressed that it would happen in discovery was really exciting. When you know you're working on something of value, everything seems to change for the better. I also, again, found that people were more willing to listen to me from outside of my initial small stakeholder groups. And that's been really fantastic in building relationships across the company.
And developers also have time to work on tech debt, right?
Yes, and that's been huge. Like, not only do they know that the work they're being asked to do is valuable and will have an impact, they also get time to work on tech debt, because who gets most irritated when we say, oh, we'll do that next time, we'll do that next time, we'll do that next time? It's the developer that knows you are slowly but surely putting something off that is going to blow up into a huge problem. And it's not going to be your problem. You're a product manager. You can't code anything. It's going to be their problem. So they really liked being able to proactively address those things before they blew up in their face.
So, sorry, Amy, for interrupt, but a quick question before we move forward. But do you have any technique that you're using for prioritize your items once they're being validated? I mean, you're running this kind of qualitative, research. You have validated with the customers. You know that is the right thing to build.
Yep.
Do you have, once that falls in the backlog that from the engineers team, do you have any technique for prioritization, or you know that everything that is there you need to build it, and the engineers start to pick them up and this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this concise. Cut me off if I ramble, because I love my backlog, and I could probably talk 40 minutes just on my backlog. But there's plenty of things in our backlog that are customer validated that we aren't working on right now, mainly because we validate things along the way. We think something's great, and then we might come across something that's a better opportunity in the course of discovery. So when you're constantly listening to your users, you're constantly learning something new, and that might mean that the thing you knew about that would be a great idea 2 weeks ago, you just found something better. And so we actually have a whole section of our backlog that's dedicated to great ideas that we've put time into grooming that we aren't doing right this second, because we are addressing a more critical problem. So for instance, right now, the biggest problem for my customers is we have a very tight labor market in the US, and they have no applications for their jobs. So while we have plenty of things in our backlog that would address other issues that they're experiencing, everything we're focusing on right now is targeted at getting more applications in front of my customers. So there's things that we consciously say no to, or not right now. And we say, hey, when we're trying to solve that problem, we've got it. We know it exists. We'll come back and we'll reconfirm it before we put dev time against it. But we can set that on the shelf and know it's a tool for another time.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah. Perfect. So we have a couple of more minutes. If you want to answer one or two more questions, Amy, and then I would like to wrap up everything.
Absolutely. The last couple of things: test like you're wrong. The more sure you are that your product idea or your feature idea is great, the more you should be testing like it's the worst thing ever. When I'm convinced something is amazing, I will actually frame all of my questions to customers negatively. So instead of saying, tell me about how this would improve your process, I'll say, tell me about how this is going to make your job harder. And if they don't argue with me, I assume that they don't actually want it that much, and I need to take a step back. Make sure you're always solving for the problem, not your solution. Always be sure that you can put things in your customer's voice. If you can't express the problem you're trying to solve through your own customer's words, there's two potential reasons for that. One, you don't know your customer well enough to put yourself in their voice. Or two, this problem is not your customer's problem. And so in that moment, you need to reassess what you're trying to do. And that's it.
Awesome. So last question to you, Amy. Could you please, recommend some kind of books, readings, newsletter, blogs, whatever you consider important, or, some people that the, guys on the audience kind of start following to try to know more about product discovery?
Absolutely. I dropped a couple links into the last slide, and I'll send you access to that right after this. There's a couple of good talks, some articles, and then the newsletter that I just can't bring myself to unsubscribe to is Mind the Product. They're awesome. They have a lot of great resources. And then Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman is really great. I know these are two really popular resources, but they're popular for a reason. And they're really great. The latest Masters of Scale actually opens with a poker game. So just so you know, I wrote my talk before that one. But they actually interview like a professional gambler in the most recent one. And I was like, well, this is timely and also awkward. So those I'll share with you so you can get them out afterwards.
Great. Any book that you're reading right now that,
Brave New Work, which is actually about taking the internal resource structure of organizations from kind of a waterfall structure to more of a networked platform structure, so that resources can more agilely move across the organization to tackle big problems. And interestingly, you guys had a speaker on who did a talk on that exact thing. And I loved what she was talking about so much. Like, I shared it with a bunch of people in our HR function. I'm like, hey guys, I'm not only reading the book, but there's already talks about this. So thank you for adding to my firepower for trying to convince them to change our reporting structure to a flat dynamic structure instead of a tiered one.
Awesome. So there's no question, I guess, but Amy, I want to thank you so much. I know that your schedule is busy. You could have been doing, discovery instead of, doing this talk with us, but it's been so great. I think that the people really, really appreciate it. I mean, I want to give you a virtual applause for your talk. And then if you wanna share the talk, I will be sending, that out to the whole audience. Again, the webinar has been recorded. We will be uploading this talk into the Agile Spain YouTube channel. So I will let you know as well. And then just thank you. If you wanna close the webinar, we'll be honored.
Sounds great. Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody so much, and really encourage you to give discovery a shot. If it's not something you're doing in your organization today, it can completely change the way your teams feel about the work that they're doing and the way your customers feel about the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, guys.